Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name's Samantha Shea and I work for GemServe. We're part of the Triple Point Heat Networks team delivering the Green Heat Network Fund. And I'm delighted to welcome you today to our Transforming the Market webinar. We're joined by some fantastic speakers and I'll introduce them to you shortly. But just before we kick off, I've got a few housekeeping bits and pieces that I just want to run through with you. Today we're using the Teams Live platform. It's very similar to a normal Teams meeting. However, you have the option to submit questions through the Q&A function, and you can find this on the top right-hand screen. There should be 2 speech bubbles, and you can submit questions through to the speakers at any point during the session today. You can post your questions anonymously, or you can include your name. Your name can help us with any sort of follow-up that we might want to reach out to you to answer your question more fully after the event. If you see a question that you like the sound of and you'd like answered during our Q&A sessions, then feel free to like it and it will push it up the rankings for us to review when we come to the Q&A. So in terms of our agenda today, we're delighted to welcome Ian from Energetic and Stuart from Vattenfall. And I'm also joined by some great speakers from across the Triple Point Heat Networks team. We've got Lauren Bright from Triple Point, Tom Bainbridge from LuxNova and Tom Roberts from Astros, and then Ken Honeysett from Triple Point will be rounding everything off and facilitating the Q&A at the end of the session today. We will be asking you a few questions throughout the presentations. Be really grateful if you could join in that conversation by visiting slido.com and using the code that's on the screen at the moment. I will also post this in the Q&A list, so you'll be able to access that. You can also scan the QR code that's on your screen. So without further ado, I will hand over to Lauren.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sam, if you can just go to first slide, that would be lovely. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Lauren Bright. I am the Relationship Director at Triple Point. So looking after the Green Heat Network Fund, and on a day-to-day basis, that means me and my team are the guys that applicants come and talk to ensure that they're going to put in the best possible application for the fund. We're here to hopefully help you make your way through all of the guidance. We're aware that there is quite a lot of it, and ensure that you feel supported as much as we can to getting a great application through. I'm doing something slightly different today. My task today is to talk to you about one part of that guidance, and that's around the market transformation commitments. So I'm going to start with a little bit of context, hopefully here. It will not be news to any of you that the UK was one of the first major economies to pass laws to end its contribution to global warming. That's that big number on the side there, net zero by 2050, no pressure everybody. We can all acknowledge that there are wider benefits than just carbon savings there. But as I am shamelessly obsessed with heat networks, let's dig down a little bit into our sector. So we all know that heat networks take time to plan, approve and construct. And keep in mind, as you listen to the rest of our speakers today, that we need to increase activity tenfold from today's position to meet that government target. Next one, please, Sam. So realising this huge commercial opportunity, that tenfold increase I just mentioned, is going to require a lot of people working together. We need to increase the supply chain capacity, but also its agility. We've got to get these things moving faster. To do that, we're going to need new market entrants, be that big or small. And we also need to educate and engage local communities and those local supply chains. They're going to become our workforce, so we need to bring them along with us. And we also need to invest in UK research and development. what's going to get us there? An engaged and knowledgeable government support. I think everyone will agree we've got a wonderful HNDU team at BEIS that are pushing forward these early stage projects. We've also got the market growth team at BEIS led by Cantor Mock, and they're working to encourage those big new entrants into the market. We've talked for a very long time about exemplar projects, and I think we've now got those exemplar projects here in the UK. The UK is now the best place, I think, to find examples of these like innovative, low carbon district heating. We don't have to look to the continent anymore. Ian's up next and he's going to prove me right on that. I'm absolutely sure. We also need that mutually supportive policy frameworks. I think everything that we're seeing coming out of BEIS, the energy bill, but also heat zoning is moving us in that direction. And I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that everyone on the call today knows about the grant funding that's available. The other thing that I wanted to put on the bottom there was this robust and transparent procurements. If we're going to have this huge, new, exciting supply chain, they need to know where the projects are and have the opportunity to bid on them. Hopefully, commercial projects going forwards. So what are we doing? So at TP Heat Networks, we are hopefully, as you well know, managing the Green Heat Network Fund. That's a 288 million grant fund, and it's available over 3 years. We're almost at the end of that first year. I don't know how that's happened, but we're here to support new low carbon heat networks and the decarbonisation and expansion of existing networks. We are similar to GHNF, providing commercialisation and construction funding to projects. We are only in England, but we're open to public, private and third sector organisations. Crucially, that includes universities, so think maybe university campuses, but also we're available to the NHS and central government departments. But it's not just grant funding. As part of the work we've been doing, we set up Beehive, that's the BEIS Heat Investment Vehicle. And that's a PCR compliant procurement platform, a DPS for those of you who know the lingo. And that is to enable us to get private sector funding into public sector originated heat networks. So it's available to the public sector, owners and developers, to obtain private sector investment and services. So that could be financial services, or that could be the commercialisation services that enable projects to go ahead. And through Beehive, you can get asset finance or equity investment. And again, that could be a new heat network, expanding an existing network, or you could even look to sell a network through Beehive. So if that's what we're doing, what we're expecting of all of our GHNF applicants, crucially, is that they will sign up to the market transformation commitments. These are the commitments that we're asking from projects to enable growth within the supply chain, and crucially to help address that heat network sector gap. So they largely fit into these 3 categories. I'm simplifying this for the sake of the time we've got today. So infrastructure commitments, we're looking for those fair and open procurements. We want you to add to a reliable and resilient energy system through your projects. Around skills, we want to identify opportunities to address that skills gap. Are there particular elements of your project that mean certain skills could be developed? We want fair and open recruitment, and we want to understand how many jobs you think you might be able to create. They could be full-time equivalents, it could be training or apprenticeship opportunities. It's all that sort of data that we're looking to collect. And around innovation, as I said earlier, you know, the UK is now the place to come to look for low carbon district heating. So let's look at ways to look at research and development, and more importantly, and potentially the most crucial part of this, is the sharing of all of these learnings. BEIS are expecting you to be reporting on this, and hopefully through the projects that we support with GHNF, lots of wider learnings can go out to the market, and that could mean we have more heat networks going forward, and hopefully we're pushing forward with them. So how are they monitored? So as I said, these market transformation commitments are required from all applicants to GHNF. They form part of the application form. So in the form, you'll be asked to give certain information. The question list is down the side there, a little bit more information than the application form. But these commitments that you put in your application, if you're successful, they will become part of your grant funding agreement. And our monitoring and reporting team will be looking at those over the years so that BEIS can get the most learnings out of them. And, you know, essentially you're held to account on these commitments. What are we seeing so far? So we've already had a couple of rounds of GHNF. They've gone through investment committee. We hopefully people have started seeing our announcements on these just before Christmas. And applicants are making commitments across all these areas here. One of the really interesting ones here is that meaningful pre-engagement with the market. We're expecting all of our projects to have a pre-market day, an engagement day. That could be with local suppliers. We want you to be engaging with your local communities as well. So all of that is included within the application form. Also on there is job creation. So I thought this might be a really easy one to show everyone. Some of these are a bit hard to summarise across all of our projects. But Sam, if you go just pop to the next page. These are some of the commitments that we had from our larger projects in rounds 1 and 2. So you can see here we're talking about the type of jobs being created and when apprenticeships are being created within projects. And you can see almost 600 jobs are likely to be created through the projects from just rounds 1 and 2. And people have put commitments in for over 50 apprenticeships. And I don't know how big this is coming up on people's screens, but you might be able to see here that most of those jobs are going to be created locally. So one of the questions that we ask in the application form is whether they are local jobs, UK jobs, or rest of the world. So that's what that breakdown there is. So we're hoping that these are going to create real long-term local jobs. And as I sort of mentioned, people are putting these commitments in at quite an early stage of projects. Most projects coming to us are asking for some commercialisation funding. So one of the really important things for our monitoring and reporting teams will be tracking this and progress over time and making sure that projects are delivering what they thought they were going to deliver. I think I've got one more slide. So most importantly, I think I just need to point people towards our market transformation commitment guidance, which is available on the gov.uk website. If you go on there and scroll down from the main guidance, it's all there for you. You can also go to the TP Heat Networks website where all this information is available. But the easiest thing you can all do is if you want to talk about this a little bit more, you can speak to one of the relationship managers. That's me, Amy or Libby, and we'd be really, really happy to talk to you at any point about your project.
Great, thank you so much, Lauren. Just handing over to Ian now.
I'll start to the presentation, but my part of the presentation is more about what we've done as a company with past funding. We were lucky enough to get 2 bids successfully through the GHNF process, one in 2019 and the other in 2021. Energetic, can we go to the first slide, please? Energetic is a company set up to address a number of challenges that we all face. We've obviously heard from Lauren about the government targets for 2050. Enfield Council has its own targets to be neutral as an organisation by 2030, with the borough being carbon neutral by 2040, which is challenging in itself, I would think, let alone the 2050 targets. The issues obviously that have driven these policies are poor air quality, particularly in London. It's a bigger issue perhaps than some cities, although many cities have the same problem. Let's not forget that we face a bit of an energy cost crisis at the moment, which is perhaps in some ways opportunistic for our industry, or it could actually be quite difficult for us to explain the charges that come through our networks to customers. So it's, I think, a double-edged sword. We've also got more and more people living in cities, which requires further heating, and the government expects us to have heat networks increasing delivery of heat in the country from about 2% of total heat to about 18%, which is quite a step up for this country in a short space of time. But there are some good news stories. Regulations coming, which I think is a good news story. It's not bad, it's good. And of course, we've got network connection zones coming through government, which will make connection to heat networks mandatory. But you can see from the slide on the right that a significant proportion of carbon emissions in the country are heat, represented by the orange quartile, a number of which are relating to domestic and commercial that can be delivered via heat networks. Next slide, please. So a bit about Energetic. We are 100% owned by Enfield Council. We're not a department, we're a separate limited company with a board of directors, but they are our shareholder. The intent is to serve thousands of homes and businesses within Enfield with low carbon heating and of course hot water through a number of high quality networks. The networks are to be very low carbon, not just a bit low carbon, which we'll go into a little later, to a high specification so they last and so they can also expand in the different areas of the borough that they've been constructed. The company was established to provide better value energy from a council perspective to its residents, as well as being a reliable form of heating and, of course, environmentally friendly. Any profits we do make, which certainly aren't happening yet, it takes a long time in our industry for the network to become a profit-making operation, but when it does, they at least go back into the council to be reinvested for the benefit of the residents. And we're a small team, fairly experienced, but we're a very small team, and we outsource most of our works and operations to partner teams, which I'll cover a bit later. Next slide, please. So we have 4 networks that are planned. 3 are operational. Ponders End, Oakwood and Arners Grove have been operating now for about 4 or 5 years, with just under about 1,000 customers connected. The main network, though, is Meridian Water. It exists because of the Meridian Water development that the council are developing on their land of about 10,000 homes over about 25 years. And it seemed a good idea that as a catalyst with that sort of development and anchor load, that we should build a network that connects to the nearby waste incinerator, which is the energy from waste plant that is run by North London Waste Authority, of which there are 7 member boroughs in North London. The intent was the Marine Water Network would connect to the waste facility. The new facility is being built now. There is an existing facility that's been there for 40 years, but we're connecting to the new facility, which has been designed specifically to take waste heat from it as well as generate electricity, which is its prime source of, I guess, revenues for the councils who are party to the NLWA. We are looking to interconnect our networks over time. That's always been a plan. But the reason we have 3 separate networks is the developments that relate to Ponders End, Oakwood and Arners Grove all happened way before we were ready to start building the Meridian Water Heat Network, let alone expand it that far through the borough of Enfield. The intent is to also expand possibly into neighbouring boroughs, probably not as an ESCO, more likely to be a sleeving system of using our pipes to provide waste heat from the Edmonton Waste Incinerator to the boroughs of Hackney, possibly Haringey, maybe further afield than that, and they'll have their own ESCOs that will take our heat and then use that heat to provide low carbon heat to their residents as well. Next slide, please. So the first application to GHNF was to build our energy centre. It's you could argue it's a transfer station. It's mainly pumps and very large thermal stores, about 1,500 metres cubed. That's roughly about 75 megawatt hours of heat. The flues on the left are chimneys required for our backup plant. If the waste facility wasn't operational for some reason, we still need to supply heat reliably to our customers. So we have a full contingent of gas boilers as standby, so that we're always able to supply heat to our customers. The agreement with NLWA to take waste heat is never ending. It's one of those agreements that as long as there's a waste facility, our contract will exist. We signed that in 2020. It's a 35 megawatt thermal supply, which is, if you think of a CHP, because this is a low carbon supply that we should be using around, not just for the, let's say, the 20 coldest days of the year, then 35 megawatts is probably 200 to 250,000 homes worth of energy. So you can see that expanding to adjacent boroughs is probably the right thing for the facility. And if we can act as a sleeving pipe system or pipe co, then that would be, I guess, the best way of getting heat transferred around North London that's almost zero carbon. The construction of the energy centre is well underway. It started in March in 21. It's due for completion in May 23. It doesn't look too much different to the picture, actually, which is gratifying since that montage was done about 3 years ago. But that's completing around about the middle of next year, ready to take heat to the first development. Next slide, please. So obviously we need a network in the roads to get to the customers from the energy centre. I thought I'd add these photographs just to perhaps make sure we don't underestimate what that means in London. It's challenging in our busy roads to get networks of the size we're looking at. The pipes on the left are DN 400 internal diameter with an outer diameter of about 710 millimeters. The image on the right is DN 500 pipe with an outer diameter of 900, so you can see it takes up half the road, which is challenging in London to have that much of the road closed down and to have working space to put the pipes in. And the middle just shows the sorts of trenches that you need to build on busy highways with some form of structural support to make them safe to work in. So it's not just about digging a trench with a JCB, dumping the pipes and moving on. It's a fairly substantial civil project for the size of pipes that we're putting in. Next slide, please. So this is an image that I'm not sure how well it'll come across on the screen, but in terms of the colour coding, the dark blue was part of our first bid to GHNF, which was to not only expand some of our what we call satellite networks that are already operational in the top left of the screen, but the bottom right hand corner is the blue network that was demonstrated in the previous photographs as the network going in from our marine water heat network. Large pipes, probably able to deliver about 80 megawatts of heat, 85 megawatts of heat, so substantial, probably 100,000, 150,000 homes quite easily. Even if you look at peak demands, if you took out the peak demand, it's probably more like 250,000 homes if you find other ways of having local heat sources to the loads. The second bid to GHNF was to deliver the yellow lines on the drawing, so a northern extension of about 8 kilometres and a western extension of about the same 9 kilometres. The intention was to deliver it the same way as the blue and the energy centre, which was to go into one contract with one contractor, design, build and operate. Vital Energy are our contractor for the first phase, i.e. the blue and the energy centre, and that was successful in its time because we got very good prices from Vital back in 2017 when we tendered. But let's not beat about the bush. In the market's changed, the world's changed. It's a huge challenge now, and delivering the yellow parts of this drawing in front of you has been a lot harder. Now, the intent was to go for a single design and build contractor. That's the easy solution for us. It takes the risk away from us. Some price to pay for that risk security, but nevertheless, it means the small team we have can deliver a large expansion of our networks. However, even though we went for funding in 21 with modelling from 2020, the market soon started going away from us in terms of cost very quickly in early 21 after the funding was granted and taken down by the council, who wanted to lend it to us. And we had to start looking at alternative measures because a DBO or design and build contract just wasn't going to be either deliverable, economically viable for the company, or get anywhere near delivering the infrastructure for the funding that we were receiving from GHNF amongst others. So we changed two of our strategies. One was we didn't decide to buy a pipe through the design and build contractor. Can you hear me, by the way, or are you struggling?
I can hear you this side.
Something?
We can hear you this side,
Okay.
Ian. But
Okay,
I'll
good.
check. Somebody has flagged that the sound's dropped.
Yeah, I can see this. Yeah, I can see that. Okay. As I say, we changed strategy, decided to go for a more fragmented approach of smaller contracts. For the pipe work, we decided not to procure it through the contractor that installs and creates the trenches for the pipe. We decided to go direct to the supply chain ourselves. Would I go that way if we had lots of money and the market hadn't gone against us? Probably not. But I think in terms of saving money, you can undoubtedly, if you go direct, take different risks, obviously, by having to free issue the pipe work to contractors, which then becomes your responsibility for its condition. But we negotiated a contract with Logstore. We, for various reasons, decided to order all our pipe in May 21, about £7 million worth, and that was on the basis that steel prices were going absolutely through the roof. We could see that pipe work was going to cost a lot more going forward. So buying all of our pipe work up front was a mitigation for the price increases that we were seeing at the time. There was another reason, which is that GHNF have fairly stringent spend profile requirements when you apply for an application, and we had to spend a certain amount by March 22. And so this is one way of perhaps alleviating that risk with GHNF and spending some of the grant funding that they were passing across to us. Could you go to the next slide, please? So that's an image of what £7 million worth of pipe looks like. We, as part of our contract with Logstore, negotiated a storage area for a period of up to 5 years. It allows us to have just-in-time delivery, which is one of the benefits of going this route. There are many disadvantages, but this is one of the benefits, as well as cost reduction. So that's predominantly DN400 pipe. It's about 30 kilometers of DN400, so that's around about 2,000 12-meter lengths, just over 2,000 12-meter lengths, 2002 12-meter lengths of DN400 pipe, and about 1,000 lengths of DN300 and DN200. So quite an impressive aerial photograph from Logstore. Fortunately, they have plenty of land over there. It takes some maintaining, which is part of the contract with them that we pay for. I think it's lanolin is what they use to try and prevent corrosion of the pipe with the atmosphere over there. It'll be the same here, I guess. And on the right side of the photograph is a small area we have in Enfield that we leased for several years, which allows us to bring that pipe work just in time to a laydown area, as opposed to trying to bring it to the roads where the work is being done, so that we've got the ability to bring pipe work in reasonable numbers, lay down in Enfield, ready for the contractor to take it to the site when required. So a sort of just-in-time delivery system, I guess, is the best way of explaining it. Good news is that I think Brexit customs is settling down, so we're typically getting our pipe work now within a week of order through customs, but it was 2 weeks about a year ago. So still, it works, and it certainly saves us probably about £1 million if you think about not only the bulk supply agreement we have with Logstore, but also the on costs that the contractor through the DBO process would have applied to that material. Next slide, please. When it comes to the delivery, these lines perhaps are a bit small, but the whole point of this image is to show that on the left was the northern extension, on the right is the western extension. is that we've got these black lines. We've actually split the contract up into 12 zones. So rather than having a single contractor delivering around about 30 kilometres of pipe, 35 kilometres of pipe for us, we've made it into 4 to 5 million pound pieces or contracts that gives us the ability to go to perhaps some of the smaller contractors in the market who perhaps don't get a look in on the big jobs because they don't have the CV to be able to demonstrate to councils that they can deliver a 15 or 50 million pound job, depending on what you're trying to achieve. So at the end of the day, it's allowed us to play around a little bit with how we try and mitigate cost. One of the mitigations is about getting traffic management resolved with the council very early. So we actually employ somebody from the council now to agree the traffic management process before we go to market, which makes it a much more fixed and understood program, and a number of teams that can work simultaneously for the contractors. That's good and reduces cost and risk. It also allows us to, let's say, play contractors against each other. So one typical contractor would have a single zone of about 2 kilometres, but we split that zone into two, an A and a B. We only let A, and if they perform well, we'll let them B with an instruction. But if they don't perform well on A, they don't get B. So there's a certain amount of, obviously, performance monitoring there that incentivizes the contractor to do well and continue to get the second kilometre of pipe install. And of course, knowing that they've got another 10 contracts to come out in the future means that hopefully, certainly in the early days anyway, they'll behave on their contracts, not try to be too commercial, with the interest of getting future contracts from us as we let further parcels of our network expansion to them. I think that's the end of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Ian. We'll just hand straight over to Stuart now. Just a reminder to everyone listening in today, please do send through any questions that you have. We'll be picking them up in the Q&A at the end. So over to you, Stuart.
Thank you, and thanks for having me today. So I'm Stuart Allison from Vattenfall. If we can jump to the next slide, I'll introduce Vattenfall, who we are and what we're about. So we are a large energy and utility company, fifth largest in Europe, 100% owned by the Swedish state. There's a few facts up on the screen, but I'm drawing your attention here to the 1.8 million customers that we have on our heat networks across Europe. So Vattenfall is the largest retailer of heat in Europe, and recently entered the UK to set up operations in the heat business back in 2018. If you could jump to the next slide. Yeah, we operate in Northern Europe and Scandinavia, so we're bringing experience from Swedish, Dutch, and German large customer bases on heat networks. If we could jump to the next slide. In terms of our climate ambitions, being owned by the Swedish state, as you can imagine, the owner is really pushing for us to be at the forefront of the energy transition. You can see some of the commitments that were made recently at a group level, including an increase in 30% of customers provided with lower or zero carbon heat. We see heat as sort of one of the key opportunities that's arisen from the energy transition, how we get customers to make that transfer. And that's really one of the main drivers for why Vattenfall established a business here in the UK about just over 4 years ago. This is really an opportunity that's seen for development of greenfield heat networks that can sit in that sort of 2030 and beyond portfolio of assets supplying customers with clean heat, and that's what we're here looking to build. So if you can jump to the next slide. If I talk a little bit about what we've done since we set up back in 2018. If you wind the clock back, Vattenfall looked at the UK market and saw some of the developments within the industry and thought that it would be a good time to establish a business and capitalize on some of the opportunities that were coming to market in what was seen to be an emerging sector. 4.5 years on, we have got offices and operations now within 3 cities, which I'll talk through briefly. I'll talk a little bit more about Bristol in a second. So first off, north of the border, we've got a 50-50 joint venture with Midlothian Council to develop a heat network initially from the back of an energy from waste plant and connect it to surrounding development within the city. But there's a view to take that heat off into the city of Edinburgh and use that as a conduit to decarbonise the built environment there. That's taken a long time to set up and establish as we've gone through COVID and a few other bumps along the way. We've got to the point where the joint venture has been established. The joint ventures struck the contracts with the energy from waste operator FCC, and also with the property developer that's putting up the new homes. Structured all of those contracts and with the supply chain. So we've let large construction packages for the energy centre and spine network in Scotland, and also placed an 8-year framework for connections from that spine into developments as they come forwards. So that's sort of finally, after a lot of development and establishment, now at the place where we're going to be commencing construction in early 2023. That project's been supported by the Low Carbon Infrastructure Transition Programme from the Scottish Government, and is really sort of, after some years in development, now ready to go, which is very exciting. In London, we are serving the major regeneration of Brent Cross Town, working with Related Argent. It's an extremely exciting project where we'll be using large heat pumps to provide both heating and cooling supplies to the regeneration there, and then looking at opportunities also to expand beyond and go into the surrounding area. And also in London, we've been working with Corey Riverside Energy on the establishment of the Riverside Heat Network. This is from the largest energy from waste plant in the UK, supporting Corey with their plans to make best use of the heat and ship it to buildings nearby. It's got the potential to be the largest heat network in the UK when it's reaches its full potential. That's a project which has been supported by GHNF and continues to crack on. In Bristol, we earlier this month we established the Bristol City Leap Partnership. This is a 20-year partnership to decarbonise and transform the city's infrastructure. It's laying the foundations from which we can really think differently about how we're decarbonising the building stock. We're partnered there with the council and with Amoresco. Amoresco bringing the capability to go within the buildings, looking at energy efficiency refurbishment, whilst Vattenfall's focused purely on the heat networks and how we can scale up the existing assets that are in the ground and then deploy further at pace. So it's exciting for us, having now acquired 2 existing heat networks. We're now fully operational and billing customers for heat and providing all the services to expand the scheme. What's really exciting there is the relationship between Amoresco, Vattenfall and the council. So through the contract framework there, we have both the rights and the obligations to try and expand the network as a way to increase the scale and the pace at which we can provide the clean heat to building owners. So we've come a long way in 4.5 years, but there's an awful lot more to do. If we jump to the next slide, I think it really illustrates what Vattenfall is seeing in the UK market, and with the title of this presentation today being about market transformation, that really jumps out from this image, which was put out either by BEIS or Department for International Trade, just to try and show what they're trying to achieve with the market in getting us from sort of the steady state growth to the high growth scenario that we need in order to hit our climate ambitions, and some of the things that have happened along the way. So the establishment of the heat network delivery units and then the heat network investment program has kick-started and is getting us there. They're key components for why Vattenfall is in the UK, and I think what's coming next with the Green Heat Networks Fund and Market Framework is really building that momentum to allow us to get up that growth curve. So if we jump to the next slide, this is really underpinned by what we see as the government continuing to support growth in this sector. three pillars to this as we see it, which we continue to support and are excited about. So I understand that Tom will be talking more about the zoning work that's being done, but with the introduction of heat zones, it really helps sort of set the direction of travel and takes away a lot of the uncertainty and optioneering that you see around heat network projects. The integration of heat regulation is going to be critical, both from a sort of customer protection angle, but also once heat networks are being rolled out and operated by licensed heat network operators, the powers and support that will come with those licenses will really help the development cycle and allow us to move quicker. And all of this is also supported by continued stimulus investment in order to, to get over the hump, essentially, with the initial establishment of these projects, getting them to tip the scales in favor of becoming investable, that will then allow us to scale up. And we can see that already with the work we've been doing in Scotland. The first phase there has been supported by grant monies. Future phases will then no longer be requiring public money, and it's really just to get those flags in the ground from which we can grow, which we're seeing happening. So thank you. Can we jump to the next slide? So in Bristol, we are we're just in the early stages, having closed the contract at the beginning of this month. Now getting into the meat and bones of delivering the commitments that were made. You can see here on the screen some of the areas that were identified through a lot of feasibility work that's been done over the years to identify and plan and map out how a heat network could be established and grown. And this is one where we're very much standing on the shoulders of giants with a lot of great work that's been done in the city so far. So there's 2 existing heat networks in Old Market and Redcliffe, with construction now beginning in Bedminster. And so we are sort of arriving to pick up those existing networks and really speed up the scale and deployment. There's been a fantastic amount of innovation, hustle, beg, borrow and steal to done by the team that's got this to where it is today, in order to capitalize on some of the stimulus funding. Projects here have been supported by GHNF, by the Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme, and also EU Replicate, in order to get whatever you need in order to expand, do the next bit, and really get that foundation in the ground. So the team's done great work to get to this point. We have a business plan that sets our intent to invest another 300 million into the heat networks in order to scale up and grow, with a substantial amount of that to be delivered by local supply chain within Bristol. As part of the Bristol City Leap framework, there are commitments for transformation within the sector locally for green jobs, apprenticeships and training in the area. When you add all of that up, it really boils down to large capital investment within the city that translates directly into local jobs and skills for people in the sector. It's something that we'll continually be monitoring and be reporting on in order to demonstrate the value from the transition that's happening. Very exciting, and it's wonderful being here in Bristol, seeing the team get to grips with how we scale up and make this now a reality. If I jump to the next slide, it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour. Just talking a bit more about the supply chain as we see it. So Vattenfall is not a sort of design and build or direct operator of heat networks. We're very much a developer, investor, and owner, and customer service provider. So we will help enable the planning, the delivery, the investment into the ownership and running of the assets, but we need to work and partner closely with the supply chain in order to make it a reality. And what we're seeing is that growth is clearly needed if we're going to get up that curve that I showed earlier, in terms of transition required to get to 18% and hit those net zero targets. There are only a few quality specialist providers who can really package up the risk. I'm fortunate to be able to draw on the experience of colleagues from across Europe to help manage some of the interfaces where we may need to break contract packages down and stitch them together. But in order for us to really move faster, I do believe that there's space in here for additional organisations who can come in and bring that specialist skill set, tying energy centres into buried networks into buildings, and wrap that risk up. There's also significant reliance on imports with a small UK manufacturing base. We do see this improving in the future as more of these projects come forwards, but that's an area where we're really going to have to support to try and manage costs and ensure we're getting the transition that we need. So to help do that as a market, I think it's critical that we send signals about the scale and the ambition that we have in these development plans, with these investment plans, and with key mechanisms like zoning, in order to encourage new entrants and help the supply chain move with us on this journey. We can't do it alone. And we also need to think locally. This will intrinsically always be local. In the way, just with the nature of heat, it's not going to be developed centrally from sort of a national view. The business that we're building in Bristol is going to be the part of the fabric of Bristol. Similarly, in London and in Edinburgh, these are good local jobs, but we're not going to see operations spread nationally. There's a real depth that's required locally in order to deliver the outcomes that we need. And we also need to focus on talent attraction, development, and attention throughout the value chain. It's a challenge that we talk about within our organisation, but it's also true through the entire value chain. The suppliers that we work with and the suppliers that they work with, I believe we all need to come together to discuss and work on how we make this an attractive industry for people to move into, can develop in, and want to stay in long term in order to make the transition a success. So our approach in how we do this is going to be through early contractor engagement, trying to set out transparently, these are the plans, this is what we're trying to achieve, and have an open dialogue with key partners to share learning and ideas about how we can go on this journey together. One of the things that we talk about is, what behaviours can we bring in order to make us one of the best organisations to partner with, and that's something I'd be interested with in the Q&A in the chat as to how we can make that most effective. We also need to get the risk allocation right and the incentives within the contract, pointing to projects which are supported by stimulus funding. There's a lot that I think could be said for the programs within those. In some of these projects, the funding's available. You've got to use it during a particular window, and that means that you need to have a upfront and honest conversation with suppliers and contractors for I need to spend some money within this period, and the upshot of missing that could be significant for the project. So how can you align your interests and get your incentives right in order to make that happen? It's also important for us to be letting contracts at scale, both in the value and also the term of the contracts. We want to pick our partners and give them the confidence that they'll grow with us as we go on this journey, and that means not necessarily sausage slicing. We need to maintain some competitive tension, but not at the expense of people being able to scale their businesses and come with us on the journey. So if we jump to the last one, a few learnings from the last 4 years and some 3 points to leave you with. Think bigger. This is not going to happen if we consider this just to be standalone projects. So this is how we are setting up for long-term asset deployment. How are we going to grow the sector, and how are we going to enable the transition that the government's looking for here? The timing is absolutely key and critical. One of the ways in which the government is trying to push this is through the availability of stimulus funding, and the takeaway there is sometimes it's a case of use it or lose it. So we'll need to structure programs in order to be adaptable and to fit the money when it's available. Like I said, we can point to projects where you need the stimulus to get the first project away, but the extensions can then be done without the need for public intervention. So it's that needs to be adaptable and to line up all the parties together in order to hit the timing. And finally, there's room in here for more. So new entrants, both throughout the value chain, are going to be required to build the capacity in the market as we grow. the next couple of years are going to be critical from for the development of the sector. With the introduction of zoning, the introduction of market regulation, we need to be able to demonstrate deployment at scale and building capacity in order to show that we can get up that growth curve. So yeah, really exciting times, more to be done, and yeah, look forward to getting into it in the chat.
Thank you so much, Stuart. It's been really great to hear from both you and Ian so far today. We would love to hear from people on the call. We've set up some questions on Slido to get your views on some of the challenges and some of the opportunities for the sector. So if you would like to participate, if you could visit slido.com on your browser or scan the QR code on your screen. There's a code that you'll need to type in, so 2303815. And if you'd like to have a go at answering a couple of the questions, we'll put them on the screen as well for you, and you'll be able to see what other people are responding, and we'll discuss them in the final session at the end of the presentations. So if you want to go into the next slide, please, Sasha. Okay, if we go to the next slide, please, Sasha. So we're keen here to understand what actions you think could help speed up delivery of heat networks across the country. We've heard a few ideas from Stuart and Ian earlier. Okay, the next question is, how can we bring the supply chain together to transform the market? And the final question is, what is needed to grow the capacity of the sector? So what I'll do is I'll leave all of the questions open for people to continue responding. But in the interest of time, we'll hand over to Tom from LuxNova.
Hi everybody, I'm Tom Bainbridge, one of the founding partners of a boutique law firm, LuxNova Partners. We are focused exclusively on the clean energy sector and nature-based solutions. I've been advising the district heating space and on projects and procurements and regulation for around 20 years. Together with my colleagues, we've got about 120 or 140 what it is, years of experience collectively. Fortunately, none of it in one person. I am a lawyer, but I'm not going to be talking about the law or any of the legal developments that Stuart was mentioning. Instead, I'm going to be talking about contracts and saving time and money through those. The LuxNova role, just to give a little bit of scene setting, as part of the GHNF consortium, we've been involved in assessing applications and concluding funding agreements and helping with milestones and conditions precedent. So if I wind back slightly, kind of before this slide, a little bit of history, which was that we were part of the team that were drafting the HNDU's DPD guidance, detailed project delivery guidance for heat networks. And as part of that, we undertook a sort of mapping exercise, trying to figure out what relationships there were that were common across just about any kind of district heating project. And then where we could see that there was a lot of commonality to identify where some heads of terms might be useful to just speed things along. Those heads of terms got picked up and were used widely by HNDU. So then part of the HNIP appointment, we were asked to then produce sort of fleshing out those standard terms, so those heads of terms, into a suite of contracts. The idea of those was that they would be useful to anybody in industry. I should start off with, they should be freely available to anybody in the industry, so not your normal lawyer perspective of charging for them. This was actually freely available to people in the industry, and they should be there to help simplify the job of getting into contracts for people in the industry. They should help to raise standards. There were, when we started on the exercise, there were not that many lawyers even who'd done any work in the DH space. And I won't go so far as to say it was trying to achieve standardization across the industry, but it was trying to provide a standard set of templates that people could use as a starting point for drafting their contracts. We launched those back in 2018, 19, I can't remember which date it was, but anyway, we've just done an update to the suite of contracts, and that takes on board changes over the intervening years, such as Brexit, some tidying up, some updating of other legislation references, and some other industry feedback. The full suite of contracts are available from the TP Networks website. They can be downloaded freely from there, and the intention is very much to make them available. Thank you. Yeah, so a reminder of what the coverage is. So the set of contracts templates for delivery of the infrastructure for district heating schemes, the operation and maintenance of that infrastructure, for connecting to heat networks, for adopting existing infrastructure and heat networks, for heat offtake, and we have sort of an in brackets electricity offtake for CHP, for leases for energy sensor plants and rooms, and we have also something as a kind of a starting point for drafting on a use of system agreement for use of heat pipes. The suite does not cover things to do with project ownership. It doesn't cover partnership models. I saw in the Q&A already there was a question that's come about that, and for sure it's something where there is a scope for sort of for speeding things along. The original objective of the SOMS suite, though, was not to try and provide models where there wasn't a standard market position. It was trying to capture a simpler route to contract conclusion where market players generally were comfortable with a set of terms, however they look like in one set of lawyers drafting, another set of lawyers drafting, so that there would be a fair degree of standardization of commercial approaches in the industry, and then just trying to standardize that in contract drafting. Next slide, please. So the two approaches that we adopted was looking at, one is saying that there actually is an entity that is actually placing contracts for works packages. It might be the local authority, it might be some other kind of project sponsor. It has its own energy company, or it is an energy company, and outsourcing works packages. The other was the concession model, where, for example, there is a project sponsor such as a local authority, could be a private developer who is looking to outsource the business of heat delivery, but that will, I mean, there are various models for this, but it could be including everything including taking risk in all revenue collection and so on. And with those models that we sort of adopted as a starting point, then obviously the concessionaire itself may then be the company that is actually placing contracts for those works packages. These are absolutely not the only two approaches possible, but they were the two that most easily sort of identifiable as common approaches. Next slide, please. So in this first one, the diagram is showing where the sponsor has set up its own ESCO, and it is then having the ESCO place those contracts with its supply chain and having the connection and supply agreements. And then the next slide, please. Or this other approach is with a concession granted, and the sponsor of the project is trying to push risk down to a third-party concessionaire, usually. Next slide, please. So in terms of what the SOMS contracts cover, then you'll see that there is, say, there is a template concession agreement, energy centre and pipework lease and easements, connection and supply agreements. We look at the design and build aspects as well. I'll go into a little bit more detail in a moment. And what I will say actually is that this set of slides is effectively the guidance for the SOMS suite. So I'm not going to go through everything that's on the slides. I'm just going to take you through a few of the most important points. So next slide, please. And again, actually, the next slide. So right, so for the downstream procurement of works packages, we saw it in this way, that there may be the works packages saying design and build, operation and maintenance, metering and billing, customer service. Yeah, there can be other divisions of those packages. What we've produced is an O&M agreement and a metering and billing agreement. Design and build, we thought, again, this is in the industry, there is massive standardization around the use of forms like JCT or IMEC-E, or the other one is NEC, that comes back to me now, or there is trying to place a more integrated procurement approach with a design, build, operate and maintain agreement. So we have a structure there for that as well. Next slide, please. These are the numbers of the contracts in the suite, so they each have a number, so you can locate them there. Next slide, please. For connections and for supply models, again, it depends on the complexity of the network and the complexity of, if it's a development, the development layout. A single connection can be quite straightforward, connection and supply agreement. If there is a large regeneration project with a master developer and plot developers and so on, particularly, then you end up in the territory of tiers of supply agreement that are useful and arrangements for connections. So if you could move to the next slide, please. And the next one again. Sorry, and the next one again. Then you see here that there's for some projects you can jump straight to those lowest tier of agreements and use them directly between the ESCO and the customers. In others, there may be the framework supply agreement is being used to, say, provide the framework for the future entry into supply agreements with customers on a development. Next slide, please. For unbundling, again, there is not any common practice in the UK. There is no established market practice at all for unbundling of networks. The vast majority of networks, there is a heat supplier who generates heat, who sells heat, who transports heat. Unbundling is where the let's call it a more sort of forward-looking model, which would then mirror more electricity and gas networks, and the unbundling of those into different functions, whereby there is the possibility, an easier possibility of introducing competition in supply of heat, or it could be in generation of heat. And again, there are various ways you could tackle introducing competition into big heat networks. This is just looking one approach to one aspect and giving a starting point for that. So next slide, please. And so it does that. It is just the kind of the use of system agreement, starting point for drafting use of system agreement for a pipe co and an ESCO to contract. Next slide, please. So just kind of helping navigate your way through the SOMS contracts. Each agreement has, there is the overarching set of guidance notes, which is these. Then there's each one has its own little sort of mini guidance note at the front end. There is full legal drafting, supplemented with a combination, footnotes, drafting notes, square bracket options. We use a common base template document to improve consistency across the documents, and plain English used for the residential supply agreement, but I'm afraid it is legalese for the other contracts. Next slide, please. They focus, yes, on heat, but actually it's about thermal energy. It could be heating, it could be cooling. There's wording to address electricity as well. We have only gone so far on electricity because, well, under HNIP, electricity was a more significant factor, given that it was CHP. Under GHNF, it is not really kind of a main line, should we say. Also, there are issues to do with criminality because of the licensing regime for electricity generation and distribution and supply. So we are wary of going too far into those, apart from in a kind of business to business context. The contract suite can be used for public sector or private sector, but there are other accounting impacts that may want to be taken into account. Next slide, please. So other points to note is, that these are documents to speed up the process, and what the intention is to have a set of documents that the market can recognize, that advisors know, that funders can recognize. Having those building blocks from these contracts And when we are drafting contracts for our clients, we will often, and again, and it's a novel situation, we find ourselves taking a bit of one contract and a bit of another contract and sort of Lego-like sort of putting things together to cover a new scenario. And that's absolutely how they're intended to be used. They do still require lawyers to do drafting. The hope is that they should cut down significantly on the time and the cost that's associated with that drafting. What we have done is, we've provided optionality around quite a number of things. What we did not want to get into was trying to dictate what commercial position should be. If we were acting on one side of a contract as opposed to the other side of a contract, we might be arguing for different things. So we were not trying to take one side here, or even necessarily say, what is the median position, because that's already, in a sense, taking too much of a market position, rather than saying the parties have to negotiate. But we've given pointers in many places as to what the points are to negotiate. And I think that was the last slide. Yep.
Thank you so much, Tom. Just handing now over to the other Tom from Astros to just talk very quickly about the work that they're doing with heat network zoning.
Thanks, Sam. Hi, everybody. My name's Tom Roberts. I'm a director at Astros Advisors, and we're part of the Triple Point Heat Network delivery team. When I saw the agenda for this in terms of transforming the market, I was desperate to get onto this presentation, to be honest, and I think some of the themes that have come out of the presentation so far hopefully underpin that as well, because we've been appointed and we're working with BEIS on the next stage of City Deep Decarbonisation programme, which is across 6 major UK cities, but it's being expanded to include kind of advanced zoning and also some London authorities to look at how you can accelerate the delivery of heat zoning. And it was really exciting, because I think the things that had triggered this and that we've been talking about were how you do things at scale and pace, how you think bigger, how you join things up. So all those kind of themes that have come through in the presentation so far were issues that were being kind of talked about to help shape this programme. So what I wanted to do is just really highlight it, introduce the work we're doing, and provide opportunity, I think, for people to kind of engage. It's not consultation based. This is at the front end of kind of thinking about the delivery issues that will help accelerate zoning and utilising the time before legislation is introduced for heat zoning to actually get that moving, get the market moving in terms of thinking bigger and accelerating it, and getting stuff ready as a bit of a kind of leave behind. So if we can just pull up the programme aims, that would be great. So the first programme aim is to kind of look at work with the existing CDDP cities to identify potential zonal network opportunities. So this is starting to join up some of the work that's going on, and there's lots of different work. So there's zoning pilots, there's national modelling in relation to zoning, but this work is starting to take that and actually apply it from a practical perspective to say, if you had a zone within a city, what would be the zonal network delivery opportunities, and how could they be advanced to a point where across a range of cities, so the 6 CDDP ones, maybe an additional 5 advanced zoning cities, and maybe 4 London ones, how could zonal opportunities be advanced and accelerated in terms of getting to early construction start and actually delivering stuff before heat network are formally introduced in terms of legislation. So using the time before that comes in to really accelerate that scale and pace, and send a signal about the scale of opportunity for investment within it in the market and what pipeline there is. So really this is looking at practical delivery, and part of that is really because I think you've probably seen from a government perspective, often there's kind of like policy development around zoning, and then there will be consultation around that helps inform it. And what we're hoping with this practical work is that in many ways this will iterate and help develop the policy, so the policy is aligned very much with the delivery, and that it becomes iterative in that sense, so it becomes very kind of practical, I suppose. And then importantly, it's engaging to actually leave a bit of a toolkit and a strategic legacy, capture the lessons learned, get more standardized outputs, which I think fits in very nicely with what Tom was saying as well, and to again provide that feedback to policy as part of it. So that's the program kind of aim. And then if we just flip to the next slide, what we're doing in that, there's a number of work packages at the moment, and these are currently running through to June this year, just as early stage work, but it's expected that this program will continue through to 2025 in advance of zoning, but be very much there to support it. The client support activities we're working on with AirCom at the moment to look at triaging across the cities the zonal network opportunities that would form part of this. So I haven't set out who's involved, but I know there's a number of people in the audience today who probably had those presentations and have seen early sight of it. The technical work stream, each city will have a technical city consultant advisory firm appointed as part of the programme, and we're working with them. They're looking at the kind of zoning maps, but then identifying where there's incumbent existing networks or planned networks, or where the zonal network could be in terms of the opportunity to deliver it and what scale that is, and where thinking bigger will provide opportunities if you start looking at it at that level. And we're leading on the finance, legal and commercial work stream, so pulling in a range of other specialists and advisors to work with us. Some other members within the delivery partner team like Amberside will be working with us to pull in knowledge on the funding part in relation to Beehive, and working with the UK Infrastructure Bank to do that. But as you can see, we've got a number of work streams, and the idea of these is to really iterate what we're doing across them, and to look at how we can actually pull in people's experience and issues that they want raised. So in terms of supplier work stream and funding and procurement and legal, we're looking at getting involvement from across the market to identify zonal issues that could come up. This may be oversizing energy centres to supply networks at a zonal level. It might be dealing with kind of incumbent arrangements or zonal pricing, but really just trying to work through these so that we can start to get specialists involved, look at them, see how they could be addressed, and feed them back out so people can get involved with them. So it was really just to highlight that as an opportunity. We've got a form as a bit of something you could fill in if you are interested or have issues you want to raise, and we can then pick that up with you as part of engaging on this programme. So
thank you, Tom. We'll share the link around to all of the attendees at the end of the session. Thank you. Ken, I think over to you just to wrap up and perhaps ask a couple of final questions to our speakers.
My absolute pleasure. Our half an hour of Q&A that we might have luxuriated in is now a pretty frantic 10 minutes. So the good news is no grandstanding from Honeysett. You haven't got to put up with me very much longer, and categorically no more PowerPoint. Our faces are all the visual stimulus you get from here on in. I'm going to do one or two super quickies to each of you, please, as we rattle through, hopefully, and then we'll promise to let everyone go promptly at 4. Top of the shop, Laura, we had from you first. You were talking about the market transformation commitments, right at the heart of the Green Heat Network Fund, right at the heart of improving the supply chain. Can you talk to us a little bit about the commitments themselves, and particularly the extent to which the needs and asks of projects at different sizes vary?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, there is a slight difference in the requirements depending on the size of project. So to give you an idea of scale here, a small project is considered to have a capex of less than 7.5 million, and a large project is a capex of over 15 million. So all projects are required to provide the sort of data points that we request. So when you go into the form, there'll be questions around job creation, about your procurement strategy, and everyone has to answer those questions. But when you are a large project, you'll be expected to give much more information on your approach to things like the supply chain skills gap and what you're going to do about it in terms of your project and the investments in local economy. So yeah, there is absolutely a difference in the amount of information we're requesting, but just to be clear, all projects will be monitored on what they've provided. And just in case any of you multiple application folk thought you were getting away with it, if you apply multiple times, your capex starts adding up. So if you apply once and you're a small project, if you put another one in, you'll be expected to start providing that information for large projects.
Awesome, thank you, Lauren. Stay off mute if you would. One of our questioners in the chat room asked us about Beehive, and the questioner asked if Beehive was just for raising funds alongside the GHNF. Your thoughts on that?
Absolutely not. So just to be clear, it was designed to work alongside it. So hopefully if you're putting in a GHNF application, you'll have a lot of the information that you might want for a Beehive mini procurement. But no, absolutely. If you have a project that you want to bring forward that doesn't require grant funding, please come and talk to us. Whether that's just you're looking for some equity funding or asset finance, but also if you're looking for a joint venture partner or a funding partner to take a project forward from sort of a feasibility or DPD stage, to use HNDU language, give us a call. Would love to hear about it. There's a whole team over at Amberside that are ready to support projects that need a bit of a hand working through Beehive.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Lauren. I'm determined that Beehive should be one of the great successes of the legacy of HNIP and the Green Heat Network Fund. It was the Heat Network Industry Council that put that dizzying 60 billion number next to the growth potential of the sector over the next few years. We shouldn't kid ourselves that could be afforded by public funds. When zoning arrives, when regulation arrives, both should be an enabler of unlocking institutional investment at scale, we hope. So watch this space, please, over the course of the year for Beehive, and Beehive events will be coming soon out to your calendars. Ian, you told us about all the cool things that were going on with your energetic team, and you answered a couple of questions in the chat, but I wonder if you could expand on a little bit. I was thrilled to hear that you managed to save £1 million in buying that pipe. Thrilled too that deliverability of the network improved through that just-in-time delivery arrangement you've got with Logstore. But I thought one of the coolest things, and it really resonates with those market transformation commitments, is it now means you're able to free issue those pipes to a slightly different contractor base. And you've had one or two questions about how you're going to manage those kind of arrangements and how that's starting to work for you in practice. Could you take a minute or two just to unpack your answer there and talk about the extent to which you've been able to bolster up your procurement team?
Look, undoubtedly we're short of talent in our industry and skills that we need, so finding people is quite difficult, but we've been lucky to drag a few people in from I suppose the contracting side of the business or the industry rather, to help us. But I think this is about engaging with the market and trying to work with it, not have preconceived ideas and then try and impose them on the market. So we are learning as we go along as to what the market wants, what they're willing to accept from us in terms of risk sharing, etc. But you know, buying the pipes in advance has saved us money, but it's brought other risks. I don't think any of the contractors quite like us buying the pipes in advance, because it's one hidden profit they get from tendering projects that perhaps most clients don't see. So, I mean, we happen to get transparency as to how much it was costing us for the pipes, so through the contractor. So we know what we saved, but you know, the contractor's got to make its money from other sources. So let's not kid ourselves that this is a simple cost save for the client. It's about then finding out how risk share works for the contractor, so that they don't try and buy risk through your contract in other ways. So you need to look at sharing risk, look at how much appetite they have for the risks you're trying to impose upon them, because the money they would have made from the profit on pipes is no longer in their coffers when they're tendering. So it's not win-win for the client all round. It's about being aware of where your contractors make money, where they take risks, where they absorb risk for some profit. And if you remove those profits, they'll obviously look to apply costs elsewhere. I'm not sure if that answers your question totally, but it tries to explain that, you know, it's not a simple matter of you do this and you win. It's a matter of you win, but you need to work hard to make sure that the market is actually still making some return in other ways.
It's a good enough answer. Thank you, Ian. We'd love to stay close to the progress you're making down there, and maybe have you back to one of these in the future and let us know how you've been getting on. Tom B, you told us about the SOMs. Thank you. Are we seeing much usage of it in the market already? And what's the effect of that usage?
Yeah, now I can't remember the figures, but Sam maybe could give us those. But I know that there have been an awful lot of downloads of the SOMs from the TPHN website. The contracts are getting used in a lot of projects now. That is all as we hoped for, so that's great. It should facilitate many things, and for sure we've had one or two occasions where a client is saying, you know, we're up against it, we need to get some documentation out on a procurement. How quickly can you get documentation together? And in some instances we're saying, well, look, in an extreme situation, just say you're going to use the SOMs. Job done, move on to the next bit. Now, that's not a full answer. It depends on the type of procurement you're doing as to whether that's actually adequate. But you know, there's a starting point then that anybody can access. So employer, contractor, consultant, whatever, can look at those and know where you're starting from. And for sure, as I said earlier on, they form a kind of useful set of building blocks to make other contracts too. We are hopeful that translates into cost savings, but sure as hell it should be does translate into time saving.
And
Brilliant.
I guess just to add there, Ken, in terms of number of downloads, we're looking at well over 220 individual downloads since they were launched.
That's really cool, Sam. Thank you. Exciting stuff. I mentioned too, for one of the other jewels in the crown of the GHNF delivery alongside the SOMs, and thinking about the Beehive in particular. There's a bit of work we don't mention nearly enough, which was the creation of something called the standardized due diligence set. This was specifically to provide heat network developers with a much better understanding of the DD requirements, the due diligence requirements of project finance lenders and investors. It's a super valuable toolkit for anyone out there seeking to raise private capital or institutional capital into their heat network project. Do please check it out in the same place you'll find the SOMs. Tom R, Nickers, 30 seconds. Why are we zoning now with legislation just around the corner, we hope? Why is the advanced programme happening today?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think this is because basically, you know, we didn't want to let the couple of years before that comes in go without the opportunity to really see what could be done to accelerate accelerate zoning, to get the thinking developed so that when zoning comes in, it can all hit the ground running and people be prepared for it. There'd be kind of that best practice and dealing with the issues that can come up and addressing those. And it's interesting, you know, Lauren says in the market transformation sheet, we're talking about 15 million as a big project. I think UKIB are looking at 25 million in terms of trying to increase it to that. I think for these projects we're looking at for advanced heat zoning, we're actually wanting to get delivery to be at a zonal scale for 50 million plus in terms of what we're going to do in that regard. Some of the work to get things away, it might be doing early enabling projects for it at a smaller scale, but in the context of that wider zonal opportunity and development, so that when zoning comes in, there's a real delivery plan and national delivery strategy to support how it can be enacted. So I think it's a really important early piece of work, and that's why we're looking to get as many kind of contributors and people involved where we can you know, draw on the issues that people experience in the market and take on board some of the learning and things that have been done better so it can make it quicker and more effective.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tom. And Stuart, if you're still with us, can you finish us off in our question that we asked people to respond to earlier today? We were looking at barriers on heat network market growth. The biggest winner by some way was skills, and there was a perception of a skills gap in the industry. You've spoken about the enormous projects up at Midlothian, but I'm thinking in particular down in Bristol. What are Vattenfall doing about developing the local supply chain and making sure there's those local skills in an area like Bristol?
Yes, that's a huge focus of effort for us. You really have to look at it sort of through the sort of the development of people's careers, and we've been setting up plans to be going into local colleges and sort of present this as a career option from people, you know, right from the outset. They can get into heat networks as a career. There's plenty of different opportunities to go through that. Also looking at picking up graduates and working with universities on, you know, engineering courses. To this isn't something that's sort of a big. There's not a big sort of syllabus on this for people in academia. We'd like to do more with that, so we're partnering with universities on getting that up the agenda in the engineering courses, and then with partners in the supply chain. So looking at how people can, you know, how people can sort of develop and have a long-term outlook in their career, making, you know, some joined-up decisions for how they can stay with the projects, they can stay with the transition that's happening. This isn't something that, you know, people necessarily want to dip in and out of. It's not going anywhere. It's long-term, and it's here to stay. That's a big part of it. And then also great initiatives to try and improve the diversity and the health of the sector in terms of making sure we've got a diverse workforce. I'd encourage everyone to have a look at the Diverse Heat Networks initiative. I don't have enough time to go into it in long detail, but there's a combination of, you know, grow your own talent, ensure that it's a sector and a set of employers that are aspirational, that people want to work for, and then ensure that it's diverse and you're proactively managing it, making it an enjoyable place to work.
Thank you, Stuart, and thank you too for the brilliant plug for the Diverse Heat Network. We're big fans at Triple Pointers. So listen, we are already a couple of minutes over. I'm going to wrap us up there. It kills me. I feel we could go on for another 20 minutes or so. A last word from me, at least. I was at a seminar last week hosted by Thames Water and KPMG, looking at the potential of the wastewater market in district heating, and I was roundly mocked for my doe-eyed optimism for a sector that is forecast to see ninefold growth over the next 27 years. I wasn't nearly too concerned with all of the challenges that beset everyone. I was foursquare for rolling ahead and seeing us take over the world. Why am I so optimistic? Well, should it arrive with real teeth, and the zoning policy that Tom described to us has the potential to deliver a real step change, I think. Great news then to hear about that advanced zoning delivery programme kicking off. Stuart mentioned heat network regulation, but beyond that, we haven't really reflected on the role Ofgem might play over the course of the next few years. We have spoken about unlocking future investment, and it seems likely that with their consumer protections and investor-friendly wording, Ofgem will do much to facilitate that. But best of all, we've heard from Stuart and Ian about the types of projects that are actually being delivered today. We've seen that giganormous amount of pipe piled up in the Logsall store that's soon going to be deployed into energetic. These things are happening right now. We are the bit of the energy jigsaw, the net zero pathway that's actually happening right here today, and long may it continue. And if I need evidence of that, well, on a rainy Monday afternoon, almost 200 of you registered to come along and listen to a seminar and hear us talking about the work we're doing as part of that journey. So very many thanks to all of you. A brilliant thank you to our awesome panelists and speakers. You know well that we have several of these events over the course of the year. More are coming before very long. So if you're not signed up to our mailing list, please do so before very long. Aside from that, I will bid you a good day. Thank you all really very much indeed. See you all soon.
Thanks, everyone. If you just go on to the final slide, Sasha, just with the contact details, so everyone's got those on screen. And we'll close there. Thank you so much.